All right, so the last issue I want to talk to you guys about today is voting by mail. This is without a doubt the issue I spend the most time on lately because it is the newest conversation, and also supporting initiatives takes a lot more effort than opposing initiatives. So, Civic Nebraska is really interested in expanding the use of vote by mail throughout the state um, for the basic reasons that it increases turnout, it decreases election administration costs, and throughout the country, every part of the state or part of a state or part of a community that starts to vote by mail loves it and continues to do so. Um, so our position is pretty simple, and it started back in 2017. Um, our previous Secretary of State put together what he called an election administration task force, in which it was trying to create an updated profile of basically what is the election system in Nebraska. So, like that second question that we did together earlier, the question of what are the rules surrounding voting, like what is our system, what is the proof requirement, what is the enforcement. This was like an official assessment of that question. Um, in that report, they also created a few recommendations for the future of Nebraska elections. And one of those recommendations was the endorsement of voting by mail. And they called it, I just want to quote it here, they called it the best long term, county friendly, and least expensive choice for Nebraska. Um, so Nebraska has used some kind of vote by mail since 2005. So um, since 2005, Nebraska has allowed some county clerks to use vote by mail for all of their elections. And I'm going to start using a phrase here I call it a vote by mail standard. So, um, important to clarify that everyone in Nebraska can vote by mail right now without excuse. And in fact, in this election, you absolutely need to vote by mail because voting in person is just silly this time around. Um, but in some counties, you can conduct the elections entirely by mail or with a vote by mail standard. And that means rather than you as a voter having to request your absentee ballot, it means that every registered voter is automatically mailed a ballot for that election. You fill it out and you return it. So since 2005, some of our more rural counties, especially some of the really ones that are geographically large with very few people, they were just kind of out of ideas for how to deal with polling places that were 100 miles away from where some people lived. They were understaffed, they were underutilized. It was just a huge waste of time and money. So they asked the legislature to be able to conduct elections entirely by mail, to cut down on drive times, to increase turnout, and to just save some money. So in 2005, we allowed counties with 7,000 or fewer people to apply to do an election that way. And when I say apply, I mean that a county will submit an application to the Secretary of State to say, please let us vote entirely by mail. Here's our plan. Here's how we'll pay for it. Here's how we'll keep it safe. And the Secretary has sole discretion to say, yes, you can, or no, you can't. 2005, it was counties of 7,000 or fewer. In 2009, we raised the cap from 7 to 10,000 people because it was starting to catch on. But that's where the cap has stayed. So there's a vote by mail standard in 127 of our nearly 1,400 precincts, and that's spread throughout 17 counties. So the first county to go entirely vote by mail for the whole county was Garden County. So in the May 2018 primary, they were our pilot program. Statewide turnout in the May 2018 primary was 23%, which is disgusting. However, in that exact same election, turnout in Garden County with their new primary system was 58.7%, significantly more than double the statewide turnout. I've had some really good conversations with the election administrators in Garden County, and they are obsessed with this new system. They said that it was an improvement by every metric. It increased turnout, it reduced administration costs, despite there being some new costs for this first transition year. It improved security, it made their voter rolls more accurate. They absolutely loved it. So since May 2018, there are now, I believe, oh gosh, I actually don't know the most recent number, but there are at least 11 counties that are now entirely voting by mail. Dawes, Morrill, and Merritt County were the second, third, and fourth adopters. Boone, Cedar, Dixon, Stanton, I don't know the entire list, but there's a lot of counties that have made this application. The problem, and this is why this is a policy issue for us, the problem is that under current statute, a county with a population greater than 10,000 people isn't even allowed to apply to the Secretary of State's office to even discuss using a vote by mail standard, even for a single precinct. So this prevents 26 counties from even having the conversation. 5 of those counties missed the population threshold by fewer than 1,000 people. So one of our major policy initiatives is to remove this population cap and at least give all counties the choice about whether or not they want to conduct their elections entirely by mail. We at Civic Nebraska really believe that our election administrators are excellent at their job, and elections in Nebraska are run at the county level. So we want to do everything we can to remove bureaucratic barriers so that the counties can just do their jobs really well. And this is a tool that a lot of administrators would like to have in their toolbox. The change we're seeking to make is not just countywide, but even for a single precinct. So I think about, as a matter of fact, I think about the voting precinct right by Creighton's campus, basically around like 24th and Burt, where there's a bunch of like really steep hills. Part of vote by mail is for controlling for unforeseen circumstances like inclement weather. And I want you all to think about if you were going to vote, let's say your polling place was in one of those buildings down the street on like 24th and Burt, and there was an ice storm that day. Those hills are so dangerous, there's no way that your car could make it down there to vote. So if Douglas County wanted to prevent that from happening, they could designate maybe only that precinct to be entirely vote by mail. Or if they wanted to, in light of this pandemic situation, if they wanted to no longer have to rely on having polling places in, let's say, a community at 100th and Maple that has a nursing home, if they want to stop relying on that nursing home as their polling place, but it was the only place available, they could designate that particular precinct as entirely vote by mail. So we want to give counties the flexibility to customize and to make decisions for themselves. Our biggest obstacle right now is just people being nervous about it being new. There's a lot of proud tradition of voting in person. Vote by mail, just like the voter ID conversation, is full of people fear-mongering about voter fraud. Just as a quick side note, voting by mail is incredibly safe because there's both a signature matching and a unique barcode incorporated into your ballot, so it's impossible to vote twice. I got asked by a senator at our last committee hearing. He asked me to walk him through how someone would go about committing voter fraud by mail. So I'm on record explaining how to do that, which is great. So I'll do that for you now to illustrate my point. So if any of you decide you want to live a life of, if you want to become a criminal, once you establish your vast criminal network and you want to commit voter fraud, here's how you do it. You'd have to, number one, you'd have to know exactly when someone's ballot was going to arrive in their mailbox. You'd have to steal it out of their mailbox. You'd have to steam open the envelope. You'd have to fill out the ballot. You'd have to forge a signature, which election officials are trained to match. You would have to reseal the envelope. You have to mail it back. All the while keeping in mind that the person whose ballot you stole requested that ballot specifically. And so you're going to have to hope that they don't notice that the ballot didn't show up and that they never wanted to vote. If all of those things happen, you might get away with it. If not, you'll go to jail for 5 years and it will cost you $10,000. So that's how you commit voter fraud. It's really hard. It doesn't happen because it's an absurd thing to do. I think like John Oliver said in the video we watched earlier, it's the criminal equivalent in terms of cost and benefit of trying to forge a Bed Bath & Beyond coupon. It's a ton of work to change one vote. It's not worth it. It is not a widespread problem. That being said, no election system is perfect. Can I guarantee you that no one has ever cheated by mail in Nebraska? Of course not. That would be absurd. What I can tell you is that it is a phenomenal system that increases turnout, reduces administration costs. It increases people's confidence in voting, and there are also a significant number of systems we can put in place to make it very hard, if not impossible, to cheat. But because Nebraska kind of is dragging its heels on adopting the policy, it's really hard to make some of the improvements that states like Colorado and Washington and Oregon have that make their system very reliable and very secure. That's my spiel on vote by mail. This has become incredibly relevant given the pandemic because, as hopefully most of you know, because I'm sure you're all registered to vote. I hope you are. If not, do it right now. There is still going to be in-person voting for this primary, but the Secretary of State and the counties have mailed out a vote-by-mail ballot application to every registered voter because you need to vote by mail this election. Voting polling places are going to be at serious risk of people getting sick. They're going to be understaffed, and voting by mail is just so simple and it is so safe. So I would encourage you all to do that. The last supplemental thing I'd love for you all to read is, and we've linked to it or maybe uploaded it, is a Medium post by an organization called the Voting Rights Lab. They're one of my favorite national partners in this voting rights or this vote by mail conversation. Their staff's incredible. We work together all the time. And they put together kind of a handbook to say, okay, now that we know that unforeseen circumstances like a global health crisis are not impossible, let's talk about what we need to do to successfully prepare for these things, either in the future or if this continues into, say, the November general election. What do we need to change to make sure that our elections are still running smoothly? And it's obviously centered around vote by mail. So I would encourage you to read that Medium post and see me for one final video after that.